Welcome to Arrival Coaching's Thrive Movement 2018 interview series. This is Beth Myers, your host and the owner of Arrival Coaching. I am a Law of Attraction empowerment coach, mentor, and speaker. And this year's Thrive Movement series is a mother-daughter series. And it's highlighting thriving in real relationships. And real is termed as real empowerment allows love. Thank you for watching as I introduce you to women who are trailblazers. They may be daughters, they may be mothers, and they may be both. And I invite them to share and reflect on their role as a mother, a daughter, and how that has influenced them on their journey to thrive and not just survive. So I'd like for you to sit back, grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever your choice of beverage is, and to sit back and enjoy the interview to see how our guest today embraces real relationships, to embrace her emotions and empower others with connections, especially with other women. Today, I would like to introduce you to my friend and my colleague, Carmen Payne. Welcome, Carmen.
Oh, hi, Beth. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
You're so welcome. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Carmen. Carmen is the owner of SOAR, Transformational Life Coaching. She is a professional and personal development coach with 25 years of experience in the areas of leadership, coaching, mentoring, training, and project management. During this time, Carmen traveled the world, facilitated workshops, developed, tested, trained, and deployed the initial phases of global CRM solution for 990 end users. In her last position, prior to making the leap from her 25-year corporate career to following her passion in coaching, Carmen partnered with Fortune 500 companies to deploy integrated IT solutions. Today, Carmen's services include personalized coaching, workshops, consulting, and speaking. Carmen loves to assist her partner Joshua in his glass-blowing studio, and in her free time, snuggles with her two very fluffy cats, Tiffany and Stephanie, which they might make a guest appearance, right, Carmen?
Right. One's right here beside me right now.
Oh,
the other one's rolling around in the dirt somewhere, I'm sure.
Having fun, I'm sure, right? So, Carmen, in 2013, you took a look back at your career and decided you wanted to help others in a bigger way. As a result of working with Carmen, her clients are able to get back in the driver's seat of their professional and/or personal path and quickly put an action plan in place to get the results they want. They hire her to get clarity on their path forward, reset their thought processes, and start living the personal and professional life that they desire. She works with clients to help them change their mindset on the obstacles that hold them back. She works with clients to strengthen them to get in alignment with their desires and to put an action into place to move them closer to their goals and their vision. And after the successful career in project management, Carmen now coaches men and women to achieve personal and professional success. And Carmen is no stranger to the stresses of corporate life, because she spent 25 years as a corporate executive, 10 years as a wife, and 7 years as a life partner and a stepmother. So, Carmen, I am so excited to have you here today on the Thrive Movement interview series about mothers and daughters.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and it is a conversation. I love just being able to connect with all of my guests, and was so excited that you said yes and I'm here today. So how about if we start with a question that is about 10 words that all of these people that you've connected with in your life, whether they be family, friends, colleagues in work, what words would they use to label you or describe you? And see if you can do 10.
Well, I'm going to be brutally honest because, some of these words were quite blunt. So they say that I'm genuine, that I'm brutally honest, that I am very loyal, I'm determined, a hard worker, ethical, I get things done, that I can be generous, but I also can be quite blunt myself, very blunt, very protective. Being the eldest of 5 siblings, I felt very protective over them growing up, and so that came up very strongly as I was growing up, and even in adulthood, I still am very naturally protective person. And my stepdaughter cracks up whenever I'm like, she comes home and she'll tell me a story about something that happened at school, and I'll say, "Do you want me to go get them?" And and I'm joking, but it's like, she's like, no.
Oh.
But it's kind of like our joke, you know, because she kind of half believes I will go get them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, and that, you know, I'm kind of very fierce in terms of what I'm passionate about. I'm a very passionate person, quite fiery. So that's how I've been described, and people tend to either love that about me, or there's aspects of that they don't particularly like. Because, you know, sometimes it's hard to hear the truth about something, even, you know, when it's being told to me. So I can be very sentimental and very sensitive to stuff sometimes. So yeah.
Well, you know, it's having that combination a lot of times, isn't it? It's not just regarding the compassion, the empathy. You know, you can still have that and be fierce in standing in your truth and helping others to stand in their truth.
Work, whenever we would have town hall meetings, they would just be waiting for me to open my mouth and to say something that everybody else in the room was thinking, but nobody else wanted to say. And somebody described that to me as being a truth speaker.
Yes.
And I never really thought about it like that until somebody pointed that out to me. Yeah, so I would often get my colleagues telling me, "Oh my God, I cannot believe you said that." But it was what we were all thinking. So thank you, you know. So I'm like, you're welcome. Yeah. I felt like somebody, you know, I feel very strongly that if I can sense the temperature in the room about what everybody's thinking, I need to say it. I need to voice that so that the leadership team in the room can hear it. Because sometimes they don't hear that feedback, and that's such valuable feedback to have, especially when you're managing teams. You know, I like to hear it. When I was managing teams, I like to hear what was going on in everybody's mind. Then I could do something about it. I could work with them collaboratively rather than having that undercurrent of negativity that can exist sometimes when you're not having that open and honest and transparent communication with other people in your team.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so important. And good for you for being that truth sayer and speaking up what you sense. And I love how you said you took the temperature of the room. You have that ability to sense other people's energy. Yeah. And that is so important when you are that truth sayer. It's not just saying something to disrupt things. You are in a way to disrupt it, to bring to the surface energy that is there that nobody else is bringing to the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way that has been able to be heard, even though it may not have, you know, they may have been like, "Oh, we'd rather just kind of push that down." That's important because that's advocacy. That's getting things done.
Yes. Yeah. So that was kind of my that was the way that was a lot of the way that people viewed me at work was, "Oh my God, what's she going to come out with today?" So it was kind of funny, but they, you know, I love the fact that they actually appreciated it. Yes. You know, so and it was not, like you said, it wasn't because I wanted to be disruptive. It was because I wanted to bring to the surface things that they may not have been aware of, our leadership was not maybe aware of. Right.
It's creating that awareness.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Carmen, as a daughter, what would be the 5 words that you would use to describe yourself as a daughter?
As a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really hard for me to describe. I have a really loving relationship with my mother. So I think loving,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think about when I lived with my parents, what was I like during that time? And I think I was very serious.
Mm-hmm.
I think my mum would describe me as serious. And I think my mum would have said about me, she would say about me that I'm a hard worker as well, because they valued that very much. And I guess I kind of tried to embody that value in our house. That I appreciate things. Trying to think. I was kind of the one I was the leader, I guess, of the kids because I was the oldest. So I was very responsible. That's the word I was looking for, because I think my mum would describe it in those terms, that I was a responsible daughter, that I'm very independent. And that in some ways they loved about me, in other ways they're like, you're so independent. Because I wouldn't ask for help.
Right.
When I should have asked for help, at times when I should have asked for help, so it's that balance between being super fiercely independent and then knowing when to be vulnerable and asking for help. So yeah, that's how I think my mum would probably describe me. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's always interesting with asking that question for the different guests that I've had on, because everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different experience as a daughter,
Right.
being in that role. And tell us a little bit about your background and your story with your relationship, because you were saying when you lived with your mom and dad. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your journey.
So I come from a very wonderful, passionate Maltese family from the island of Malta, and they emigrate to England. And so to kind of give you a summary, my real mother died when I was 10 years old. But during that time, from the age of being a baby to being around 10 years old, I lived with my biological mother for a while, with my sister, and who's younger than me, and my half brother, who is 9 years younger than me. So we kind of were living with my mum for some of that time, in foster care for some of that time, and I also lived with my aunt, who ended up adopting me for some of that time. But when my mum became too mentally ill to look after the kids, we ended up in the foster care system. I ended up actually living with my aunt and uncle, my mum's sister, older sister, during that kind of time. But my brother and sister ended up in the foster care system somehow. And I would go visit my mom in the mental hospital and stuff like that. And it was an interesting time. I didn't quite understand what was going on. I was actually afraid of my real mom because I didn't understand what was going on with her. And she had me when she was 16, 17 years old. So she got pregnant with me at 16 at a very, very young age. And it was very scandalous time because my family are Roman Catholic, strong Mediterranean family values. You didn't have sex out of wedlock, right? And all that kind of stuff. And her being a teenager and getting pregnant so young. So, my birth was like really scandalous. And my biological father, my real mother's parents wanted them to get married. So they literally forced them into getting married. It was like a shotgun wedding kind of thing. And they ended up going back to Malta. So my early childhood, I was living in Malta for a while before my mum ended up leaving my biological father because he would physically abuse her and mentally abuse her. So she left him with me and my sister we moved back to England. And then from there, it's kind of a little fuzzy for me because we lived with her for a little bit. And like I said, we were kind of in and out of different foster care situations, lived with my grandparents for a bit at that time as well. So it was a real messy time. And then anyway, when I was 10 years old, just before my 10th birthday, around Christmas, we got the phone call from the hospital that my mum had been killed, because my mum was a very spirited, passionate lady, and she really did not like having the drugs being given to her. She was a schizophrenic, mentally. She was diagnosed as being with schizophrenia, and she would vote. I guess that's where I get my characteristic to speak out. But she would vocalize how the drugs made her feel. She did not like taking the drugs. She said they numbed her too much, and she liked to be present in the world. That's the sense I get from just being around her and reading the report that we got about her death and how it happened. And so anyway, she escaped the mental ward and ran out onto a busy road and got hit by 3 cars and killed. And that was first week of January. That was around Christmas, and then we buried her the first week of January. And so that was around my 10th birthday. And so when that happened, that was kind of like a pivotal thing for me as a kid, because my aunt and uncle were like, okay, we have 2 of her kids in the foster care system. So my sister and my brother were in the foster care system. We have Carmen living with us. We need to bring those kids into the family. We want them out of the foster care system and bring them into the family. And so my brother ended up living with me. So my aunt and uncle already had 2 kids of their own. So they ended up adopting me, adopting my younger brother. And then my sister ended up being adopted by my real mother's other sister. It's very confusing. My other sister and her husband, and being raised by them. And my other aunt and uncle lived next door to where I was being raised. So my sister was actually living next door to me when I grew up. So we were all kind of together. And it was a really interesting experience to have that, and be very blessed to have an aunt and uncle who were willing to take on 2 or more kids of their own in addition to theirs, And I'm really very grateful to my cousins, who I call my brother and sister, who I was raised with, for them actually accepting me into their house, because I was very displaced. My biological father didn't want anything to do with his kids. And the fact that the family took us all in and wanted to raise us and love us and as their own was huge as a child to have that. So I was always extreme as a daughter to my aunt and uncle. I was always extremely grateful that they took me and my brother in, and I was always extremely grateful to my cousins Jason and Joanna for letting us live in their home and share their home with them and things like that. So that was when I look back on it now, I'm extremely grateful to them.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you say gratitude or grateful several times, and it sounds like that's a huge part of your life, and that you've incorporated that from a very young age. Could you speak to that a little bit of, how you do that gratitude practice within your life to get comfortable? Because some people would not come out of a lot of the ebbs and flows that you experienced in your life. So what were the tips that you would give people to help embrace that gratitude more in life?
Well, there's a couple of ways I could have gone, right? I could have been a very delinquent, rebellious child and seen everything that had happened to me up until that point as a very negative impression. Would have been easy for me to go off the rails and do all kinds of stuff, right? Get into trouble all the time and things like that. But I don't know what it was, Beth, but I felt very strongly that I didn't want to be a victim of the situation. And I certainly, having seen my real mother and what she went through, and I saw a lot of stuff with her what she went through because of her mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be that. You know, I had that as a, if you like, an example that I didn't want to emulate. I didn't want to end up like my mother. And so I felt very strongly that my life had to be different. And I've been, you know, when you're being given an opportunity to be raised by people who love you and have their very strong values about hard work, family, strong family values, all those kind of things, I was very impressionable as a child. And I guess I just took all of that on, and I never felt like, I felt like this is going to sound, I guess you could understand it in some ways, because I was being taken in, I felt like I had to please my aunt and uncle. You know, I felt like I had to prove my worth to be there. So, you know, I was very much the pleaser. I wouldn't say no. I would try and behave and all that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously I wasn't the perfect kid. I messed up now and again and stuff like that. I was a kid. So I was always trying to please them, and work hard, and, you know, do my chores and things like that. And because I felt like I had to show them how grateful I was to be living under their roof, and also grateful that they took on my brother, who was he was 9 years younger than me, so he didn't know any different, right? And so I felt a very huge responsibility at a very young age to kind of show my worth and my value, and to my who I now call my mum and dad, to my mum and dad, for having taken me on and my brother on, you know. So I don't even know how I knew that at that age, but there was just something that I felt like I had to do. I felt like I had to be in service to that, to honor them taking me and my brother on as their additional two children.
Wow. And, you know, sometimes being in that people pleaser role, if you would say that can sometimes cause us not to be in that empowered role as a girl, as a woman. And sometimes it was a coping mechanism, right? And so give me an example of, as a daughter, what was a memory that you have of being really empowered as a daughter? And you know, obviously, you know, what you just described was a coping mechanism that helped to bring you forward to where you are today. But give me a memory that you remember.
Oh my gosh.
Where you felt like you stood in your power as their daughter, as a daughter.
You know, that didn't come until much later in my life, I think, because I felt, you know, living with them, not to say that I didn't feel empowered. I certainly felt loved. I certainly felt provided for. But pretty much that entire time that I was living there, I was very much under that people pleaser role. And so it was hard for me to feel really empowered, like really like stand in my power. Now I watched my sister, their daughter Joanna, she's a power. She was really empowered. But she didn't have all the baggage that I was going around with in my head in terms of what I was carrying, because she was their kid, you know, and so her relationship with her parents was totally different to mine. But when I left the you know, being under my parents' control, if you will, and also it was self-imposed control, right? Because of what was going on between my own ears. And I actually left the house at the age of 19, I think, to go live with my cousin for a while. I rented a room from her. And that's when I started to feel very empowered as a daughter, because I felt like all the things that my parents taught me as a daughter, because they made me very independent. And I guess thinking about it, you know, when I got my first job and I was earning my own money, and it was like peanuts, you know, but my parents really helped me manage my money. You know, my mom and dad really taught me how to budget for stuff. And I was really grateful for that, because that actually made me feel very empowered, because I was like, okay. And my mom would ask me to give her housekeeping money. So I would give her some of my paycheck. And that was kind of, if you like, rent, right, to live there. And the rest was mine, and I would save some. I would put some towards my car, because I was responsible for paying my car insurance and the road tax back in the UK and all that. And the rest, you know, if I had some spare, I would go out and spend it on myself or whatever. And so that was really, I guess, what you would describe for me as feeling empowered, because I felt like I had my finances under control because of what they taught me. And, you know, so when you leave the parental home and you're out on your own, that lesson about how to manage my money really made me feel empowered, because I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can go live with my cousin, rent a room from her, pay, you know, and, you know, figure out what that's going to look like from a financial perspective. I give her this much money, and, you know, I give my car this much money. It was really basic and simplified back then. But that really empowered me to be very independent as a daughter, that I wasn't going back to them constantly and saying, oh, can you lend me some money, mum and dad? And can you do this for me, mum and dad? I felt like, oh no, they gave me all the life skills I needed to get out there and be independent and thrive on my own, you know, and I did. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, you know, for what they taught me there. Because when I look at the generation today, I don't know whether every kid could say that they can go, you know, leave the family nest and actually survive and thrive on their own, because they don't get the same lessons that I received from my parents as a daughter.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because as you were speaking, I was thinking about, I'm not sure that as many kids today get that same opportunity and learning, because you know, sometimes it's parents wanting to help their children, but it's not in an empowering way a lot of times.
Right.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's one tip for moms, for parents, to be able to say, here's a way to help your child feel empowered.
Right.
Doing that in the financial way, helping them with managing money, with putting money into buckets to become self-sufficient. And that's a very needed skill from my perspective of having, you know, worked with children in the elementary school, and even just observing, you know, kids that are within my own family, as well as others' families, of, you know, being able to be like you felt, of being very empowered financially, to know that you were self-sufficient and could, without having to depend on someone else to take care of things for you.
Yeah, and that skill was very, and I, you know, when I got divorced after being married for 10 years, that skill was huge. Right? Because now suddenly you're on your own, and you have to separate your finances from your spouse, and you have to go live somewhere. You know, in my case, I moved out of the house and went and lived in a flat on my own for a while. And that skill that they taught me, my parents taught me, was huge. Right? Because I'm like, okay, now I just have to, you know, now I have to go back to doing things this way again, because I'm out here on my own again. And so my parents really did help you know, their kids become very self-sufficient. They were really good at giving us those, like, even like the stuff like cleaning the house, right? I would help my mom clean the house all the time, and I would cook dinner and stuff like that. So I was really well trained by my mom.
You were.
You know, to go out and live on my own. There was some, you know, there was often nights in the week. I was in the kitchen from the age of 10 years old, cooking spaghetti sauce and Maltese dishes and stuff like that from a very young age. My mom showed me how to do that. And I love her for that, because, you know, I was able to go out on my own, and I knew how to cook, I knew how to keep a clean house, and I knew how to manage my finances. Right? How many other kids off the bat can go out and do that on their own? Right? And so they empowered me in so many ways to be able to go in and be self-sufficient, and not have to run to them every 5 minutes because I didn't know how to do something. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So yeah, no, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's such an empowering message for mothers and for daughters. Now, I know you mentioned that you have a stepdaughter. So
I do.
Tell us a little bit about some things that you do to help her to step into that empowered role, how to not feel as disempowered as girls growing up or women can feel at times.
You know, it's funny because when I think about how my mum was with me sometimes, you know, if I shone too brightly, it was considered showing off, right? And so you have to kind of tone it down. You weren't allowed to shine too brightly.
Dim your light.
Yeah, dim my light, exactly. And with my stepdaughter Olivia, you know, it was funny. I met her when she was 9 years old, and she just turned 17, and oh my God. And I can't believe it. It's like in a blink of an eye, she's 17, and she's driving now, and she's actually very blessed because she has two parents who love and adore her, and she was already empowered when I met her because of the way they love and nurture her. And where I felt I empower her is I don't put any limiting beliefs on her. I'm like, you want to do that, Olivia? Go do it. You know, I don't want her to have any feelings of that there's a ceiling that she has to hit and that's it. For me, because she has aspirations to be an actress and things like that. And I'm like, go for it. You know, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I don't ever try to stifle her dreams. Now, you know, there's that realistic piece of it, like, okay, how are you going to get there and what are you going to do? And she's very pragmatic. She's like, well, I have to have a plan B in case plan A doesn't work, right? All of that. And that is all her. You know, she's just, you know, I try to encourage her as much as I can to be who she wants to be, who she is. And she's got a very strong sense of self. And I just, you know, when I look at her, it's funny because I came, you know, I was adopted as a child, and when I look at Olivia sometimes, I see, even though she's not you know, I didn't birth her, there's just so many things in her that I see sometimes that are a reflection of myself. And, you know, I guess the universe brings souls together for specific reasons, right? And she has taught me so much. She has taught me so much. Like, so when I hear the voice of my mom in my head, like, oh, you know, and they're not necessarily positive thoughts, but like how my mom would react to a certain situation that I'm observing with Olivia, I'm like, no, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to say that to her. I don't want to think those things around that. So I'm always kind of like shifting my perspective or shifting my energy around those thoughts and going, where can I come from? Where I need to come from my heart space. I need to come from here. And so with her, she's really helped me recognize when I'm not doing that and helping me shift to become, you know, doing that, coming from my heart space even more. So, you know, I hope, you know, she would say the same thing, that I'm always trying to empower her and encourage her and shine her light as brightly as she wants to shine that light all the time.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
She's a very lucky young lady, and you are very lucky to have her in your life. And
I am.
I believe that you attracted one another to continue to grow, because, you know, as I was listening to you about your conscious thought of wanting to shift what you hear in your head, that you don't necessarily act on that. You flip it around to see how could I present this differently. And what a gift that is to be able to share that. And what it's a dual gift, because it's a gift for her, but it's a gift for you to reframe some of those experiences, some of those thoughts that are embedded from your experience with your mom, and being able to shift that and know there are ways to reframe that and look at that a little bit differently to make it be how you want it to be, more empowering. And I know you talked a little bit about your family being close growing up, living next door. Your sister was with your other aunt, and I assume you're an aunt as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do you show up in the same role as the aunt as you do as a stepmom to Olivia, or does that differ a little bit?
You know, the reason I'm able to show up for Olivia the way I'm able to show up, I think, is A, because of my background and my experience, and B, because of all the tremendous training and learning that I've had as a coach, right? So when you're going through any kind of training for coaching, and you know, I went through the Christy Whitman's Quantum Success Coaching Academy, and prior to that I went through a coaching certification here in Tempe, Arizona, at a wonderful school called Southwest Institute of Healing Arts. And with everything that I experienced through both those programs and the reading that I've done with Law of Attraction and things like that, all of that information has really helped me show up very differently today for my stepdaughter, had I not done that training and been able to really understand and do a lot of forgiveness for everything that happened in my childhood, right? All the stuff that I saw and I witnessed, the things that were said to me as a child, all those things, had I not gone through all that training to become the coach I am today, I really don't believe that I would have been able to show up for Olivia the way I'm able to do that. To have that, okay, I'm not going to let these triggers and this old programming dictate how I'm going to show up for my stepdaughter, right? And then when I think about my nieces and nephews, oh my God, they're just, I love them so much. I mean, I feel like I've got a gazillion, but that would be a huge exaggeration. My youngest sister, she has 4 kids who are just absolutely adorable, and my real sister Sonia, my youngest sister would be my cousin in the family tree, but she's my sister. I love her to death. She's got 4 kids of her own, and then my sister Sonia, she has 3 kids of her own. And you know, it's so funny because when I look at my sister Sonia, she and I are so different but yet so alike. And when you hear us speaking, we sound really similar. When my hair is straightened, people can't necessarily, they think I'm my sister. It's so funny. I used to fool when my grandfather was alive particularly, if I showed up at the house with my hair straightened, he'd say, Sonia, and I go, no, it's Carmen.
I bet you had fun with that.
I had a lot of fun with that. Like, I wonder when he's good. And sometimes I wouldn't tell him it was me, or I would just kind of tease him. But anyway, but with my nieces and nephews, I think I am a little different. And I'm not sure whether it's because there's that blood connection, and there's that, you know, familiarity. They're my tribe, you know, and so when I'm with them, it's just different. And I live in a different country, but whenever I go back home to England or Malta, and I see, you know, especially England, because they all live in England still, but when I go back to England, even though I may not have physically been in contact with them for months and months, a couple of years or something like that, as soon as I see them, there's that instant attraction, that instant bond, and it's like I saw them yesterday. And I love that aspect of that part of my relationship with my nieces and nephews, because even though I'm far away, I still feel like they love me just as much as if I was living in England, seeing them every day and hanging out with them and stuff like that. And I just love them to bits. Yeah.
Oh, how blessed all of you are.
Yeah. I forgot to say my brother Jason, he's got, how many kids has he got now? See, it's hard to keep up. Maltese people breed like rabbits. Say, my brother's got 4 kids. Yeah. Now too. So you can see, you know, I've got 2 godchildren that from my best friend at school who call my auntie, and you know, I've known her since I was 11 years old, so we've known each other for over 30 years. Wow. It's a long time. Yeah. So her kids are like my kids. They're all my kids.
You know what? It's just a reaffirmation that we don't have to be a mother by giving birth to someone, to a child. Having that connection is really all about just the relationships that are built. And, you know, I don't have any of my own children. I have nieces and nephews, and I have children that I worked with at school. And they were like my children, you know, doing that mothering, giving that female energy, bringing that forth, because we all are daughters of the universe. Yes. And we're here to help serve and support in any ways that we can. Yeah. And this has just been such a delight today, Carmen. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, it can't be the time already. But I love how you've just really brought forth lots of different roles that one can play in the life of raising a child and helping raise other children, and being that support, being that loving guide, helping to brighten someone's light, not dim someone's light. How important gratitude is, all of the things that you just talked about from your own experiences and your story. And I so appreciate you sharing with me and with our viewers today. And if people would like to get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about some of the coaching that you do and ways that you support others, if somebody's local to where you are in Arizona, you know, maybe they'd like to come to one of your workshops that you present. So tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you.
Well, I have a couple of ways. You can contact me through my website. It's www.soartlc.com, or my email is soar.tlc@gmail.com. So there's a couple of different ways they can contact me there. And on my website, there's quite a few different Carmen's Coaching Corners, which is a free resource to everybody. They can go on there and watch the different videos where I share tools and tips to help you live a more empowered life, and get through some of those fears and negative blocks that we may have, and limited thinking that we may have. I also do career coaching. So especially if you're in the Phoenix or Tempe or area, in the Valley area, and you're looking for to transition from where you are currently and work somewhere else, or if you've been unemployed for a while, I typically run a monthly workshop here in Phoenix, so you can check that out on my website too. And I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and speaking and stuff like that. So if you're in the Valley area, just connect with me on Facebook as well, because I have a Facebook page. And then I usually announce on Facebook.
Is it SOAR?
It's under my name. If you can look under Carmen Payne. I never remember my Facebook little tag, but I think it's at SOAR Transformational Life Coaching. You can look for it that way too on Facebook.
And I'll put that at the end of our video as well, of how to get to you at all those different, in all those different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, Carmen, to end our conversation today, what would be one resource, one thing that has just been a grounding force for you? Whether it's a book, a line in a song, you know, any closing thoughts that you would like to share that just has been so grounding for you in being that daughter of the universe, and showing up as a stepmom, showing up as an aunt, showing up as a godmother, and being in those roles in your life?
Sure, there's a couple of things I'd love to share. One is an anonymous phrase or affirmation, if you like, I would say it was guideline to live by. And I always have it printed out, where I have it printed out in my office. And when I was working corporate, I had it printed out on my cube, because whenever I could feel myself going negative or being in that toxic spiral, I would look at that, and it would just bring me back in my body and ground me. And it goes like this: everyone you know is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. Be kind always. And that was really, every time I looked at it, I was like, okay, all right. And then I would go into that conference call that I was dreading, or something like, or a meeting that I wasn't particularly looking forward to, but that really helped ground me. That, in conjunction with there's the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and then he brought out the 5th agreement with his son. And and I had the synopsis of all 5, again, printed out on my cube at work, and also now that I'm not there, in my home office. And those 5 agreements, you know, they just, again, they serve a same purpose for me, just to shift my mindset, to help me put things in perspective, you know. And I just think they're wonderful guidelines to live by. If you can practice, I call them practice, because nobody's perfect, right? You're a human being actually, I heard the other day that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And I love that, right? Because we're all energy, we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. And when I'm having a really human experience, reading those 5 agreements help me remember that, you know, and just put me in that right energy, so that I'm projecting the right vibrating a higher place, in a higher space, whenever I interact with somebody. So they're the 2 things that really help me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And I'll put that information in the end credits as well. Just the name of the book, and see, maybe you can send me the quote and I can put that at the end.
I will.
Fabulous. So.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Carmen, thank you so much. I so appreciate you joining us today for this conversation about thriving in real relationships with the Mother-Daughter series. And I hope all of you as viewers enjoy this interview, as well as the next monthly interview coming up in June. And if you have any questions or comments for us, please feel free to leave them on YouTube, on Facebook, and feel free to reach out to either Carmen or I to assist you on your journey to thrive, not just survive. And until then, be true, be you, and be well. Take good care, and thanks again, Carmen.
Oh, you're welcome. I loved it. Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome. Take good care.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let me stop the recording here. And